What childhood injustice are you still mad about? When it took a week to get my arm in a cast because my dad, a medical doctor no less, thought I was faking having broken my arm. I was not the one who kept leaving a dump in the toilet without flushing. It was my goddamn cousin and no one believed me. I did not need a lesson on how it's common courtesy to flush. I was well aware of that at 7 years old. No wonder my cousin grew up to be a lowlife getting away with crap like that at such a young age. I was blamed for stealing $200 from a friend's piggy bank. His parents arranged a meeting with me and my mother. They sat me down at their dining room table and interrogated me. Do you know what truth means? Do you know what stealing means? They blamed me and kept saying they just want to hear me take responsibility for my actions and to admit I took the money. Rumors spread at school that I was a thief and people started blaming that I stole their stuff too. I never took the money. Oh man, when a teacher told me off for having long hair. The exact quote was, "How do you expect to be able to think underneath all that hair?" This came from a woman. Well, she had a point. She was clearly struggling at any rate. When I was 11, we moved from a tiny town in the mountains to New York City. After my first year in my new school, I won some kind of city award for academics. It was to be presented to me by none other than Chuck Schumer at our 6th grade graduation. The time had come and I was summoned to the stage to receive my award. There I stood, tall, nerdy, awkward, new and smart. I waited. Chuck talked and talked, then talked some more. So much that he forgot the reason he was there and walked off the stage, just leaving me standing there in front of everybody. After I came of age, I never voted for him. I can hold a grudge for a long time. My 8th grade computer teacher pulled me out of another class one day and accused me of crashing all the computers in the lab. He said if he was to ever hit a girl, that girl would be me. He was so angry he was actually shaking. Mr. C, if you're out there, it wasn't me. Even if you had crashed them, that response was unacceptable. In the 4th grade, our teacher had us write a paper about 3 of our life goals. Being around 10 or 11, my life goals were pretty unrealistic. I really thought I could make it as a professional singer. I was the first one finished and she read over it and yelled at me, told me to come up with new life goals, and grow up because it wasn't the 3rd grade anymore. Got pulled out of class in grade prep by the librarian because I apparently hadn't returned a library book, which I had. When I told the librarian this, she starts screaming at me, calling me a liar and so on. Eventually she decides to make me go through the library shelves to find this book. By this point I'm crying my eyes out, completely terrified as I've done nothing wrong. I find the book and the librarian just sends me back to class. She didn't even apologize or anything. Freaking butthole. My brother bet me I couldn't eat an entire bowl of pudding. Well, I did. Then he said I had to lick it clean. So I did. Then he said there were still pudding particles about the bowl. I had to rinse it with water and drink the water. I was 4, but still knew when to cut my losses. Sucker owes me $0.50 if you ask me. My adoptive mom was crazy. One day when I was little, maybe 8, she lost an earring and decided I must have done it. So she punished me like she always did. Screamed at me, beat me, made me write 100 times that I wouldn't touch other people's things, kicked the dogs because I had made her angry, and made me sit in my room for an hour, on the edge of my bed, hands crossed, no talking, reading, moving, etc. A few days later she told me she knew I didn't take it but just wanted to punish me. She did lots of crazy crap and lied a lot and was really physically and emotionally abusive, but for some reason this one thing really stuck out. She knew I didn't take it, and I freaking hated it when she hurt the animals cause she was mad at me. A few days later she told me she knew I didn't take it but just wanted to punish me. Dude. When I was in 3rd grade we were told to write about our favorite animal. I got super stoked and started writing about the cheetah. The kid who sat next to me in class also happened to bully me. He copied me word for word, then ran to the teacher to turn it in first. When I turned mine in, the teacher said I'd copied him, and that not only would I have to start again, but I'd have to pick a different animal. Also, when my mother eventually believed that I was being bullied, I was bigger than the kid, so she thought I'd been lying. She told the teacher against my wishes. Teacher pulls me and the kid aside. and says Feedma quick says you've been bullying him. Is this true? He says no. She lets him go out to recess. She then tells me not to lie, gives me an extra assignment on lying and makes me spend the next few recesses in detention. In the 2nd grade or so, I was playing flag tag in a big field day event, and I was kicking butt. It got down to just me and this girl from another class that I didn't know. She ran up, grabbed me by the arm, dug her nails in, twisted my arm behind my back, grabbed my flag while I was down, and ran off waving it in the air towards her friends shouting about having won. When I showed the refereeing teacher the fingernail marks and the blood running down my arm, she told me I was being a bad sport and was disappointed in my behavior. That certainly taught me a lesson about sportsmanship. Not sure if it was the one she intended. In junior high, girl teams would play against boys. Since we're the weaker sex, we were allowed to scratch, push, trip, pull hair and even bite the boys. At the time I thought it was fun. I remember the guys complaining to the teacher, but they were told to suck it up. Some of the girls were taller and bigger than the boys. If the boys tried to get back at us, they'd get sent out. In 2nd grade, a girl I shared a table with randomly burst into tears and blamed me for pushing her table and kicking her when asked what was wrong. I totally didn't do it. I was called to the teacher's table and she sternly asked me why I had done that to Rebecca. I told her that I hadn't done anything and the teacher glared at me and sighed like I was a little liar. It annoys me because I was the quietest little butt-licking teacher's pet in the whole grade. Feelings were hurt that day and they weren't Rebecca's. It's pretty dumb when teachers always seem to treat these little misdemeanors as seriously as the police, but always forgot the part about innocent until proven guilty. A teacher once got me in trouble for daydreaming in class. She was so proud on the first day, telling everyone she could spot a daydreamer a mile away and had the perfect test. She would look at you and move from side to side. If your head didn't move to follow her, you weren't paying attention. A few months later, while she was lecturing at her desk, she begins leaning from side to side. I thought this was curious but didn't think much of it. All of a sudden she exclaims out loud that I must be daydreaming as I wasn't moving my head to follow her movement. I was sitting in the back. I barely had to move my eyes to see the whole front of the room. She was seated as she was moving her body. Unless you are 2 meters in front of her, you won't have to move your head. She was notoriously out to get me, but even this was extreme. When I was little, we had this big box television that my dad bought. Well, one day I was watching cartoons with my brothers and one of them, who I shall dub as he, had the controller. I tend to space out and it was a lot worse when I was little. I was in a trance and didn't notice my little brother smash the controller to smithereens in front of me. He proceeded to dump the pieces just next to me. Get up and get the heck out of there. My dad came back to find the pieces to the controller next to me and assumed I'd destroyed it. He took off his belt and gave me an absolute belting while I vehemently screamed that I didn't do it. To this day I'm still mad about it, and dad claims it was because I wasn't watching what my brother, or that it didn't happen. One time I was away at camp. My little cousins chewed on my Xbox 360 analog sticks back when it was new. My dad says it was my fault for leaving them out. Went camping with the family one year. One of my mates was also at the campsite and he and his uncle had gone fishing that morning and got heaps of Mina's stuff. I went over to help clean everything and spent all day preparing all the food, and they told me they would come around later and I could have first pick since I'd helped so much. They came around like they said they would and were hanging out with our parents and other randoms. But when I asked for some, my mum and dad said no, you guys have to wait. Let the adults go first. So I'm just sitting there waiting with my friend, brother and sister, and an hour or so later my mum comes over to us and gives us what's left. One piece of fish. I go nuts at her saying it's not fair etc and get sent to bed. I'm getting all steamed up just thinking about this. When I was in year 2/3 I read absolutely loads of books on dinosaurs. I loved them. So in school you can imagine my excitement as I discovered that we were going to be learning about them. The teacher asked us to write what we already knew about them. Oh boy, I was thinking, time to strut my crap, so strutted my crap I did, confidently writing facts about dinosaurs. but I noticed the boy next to me would pause whenever I did, rub out whenever I did, and was writing the same words as me. We handed the work in and we both had to stay behind at lunch because the teacher couldn't determine who copied who. Also, my teacher laughed at me because she didn't think a dimorphodon was a thing. My 3rd grade teacher told me one morning that I was a bad colorer and that her twin sons who were younger could do a better job. Her sons were only a year younger than me. This woman became the principal of the elementary school. Chaps my buns every time I think about it. When I was 8 or 9, I decided I would build a plane with cane and just freeball it. No plans, no guides, just build what I saw in my head. It started small, maybe the size of my hand, and I just kept building on it. Fast forward 2-3 months, and suddenly it's this giant 3-foot biplane with a motor that turns both the propeller and the wheels. I was so proud of it. I've never been a creative person, but this plane? I created this. I was working on it. The last day I had it, my mom was on her computer, and I'd set it down behind her chair. She rolled her chair back and over a wing, completely tore up the wing, which sucked, but was fixable. I don't remember how I reacted. I probably overreacted, but what my mom did in response, I'll never understand, and will always remember. She sat down on the ground, right in front of me, and dismantled the plane piece by piece and put them all back into the garbage bag that I stored them in. All I could do was sit there and cry as I watched her. I've brought it up twice. As an adult, she denies it ever happening, says I must have imagined it. She denies it ever happening, says I must have imagined it. Yeah, parents really hate admitting when they're wrong. Even years later, my parents do this too. When the guidance counselor didn't offer to help me when I showed her the bruises from my stepmom. In fact, she called our home and told my stepmom I had come in about it. Guess how that went? My dumb CB 4th grade teacher hiding my glasses from me, after me, along with several of my friends try to find them to no avail. I had my parents buy some more. It later turned out they were sitting in her desk drawer the whole time. Her excuse for not giving them back: he didn't ask. I entered a contest in the magazine of a popular building block toy. Eventually I saw the winners posted in the magazine, was disappointed I lost but moved on. Until about a year and a half later, a new line was released that was way too similar to my contest entry. I showed my parents the new line, without mentioning the contest, and both of them pointed out how similar it was to my entry. Edit. I had also shown a few friends the contest entry, and when the new line came out they came up to me and asked if I had seen how similar it was to what I came up with. I wrote a letter to my favorite building block company, but nothing ever came of it. Had a massive discussion with a teacher when I was around 10 about shadows. She stated that if you had a light source and a wall, then moving an object further away from the light source, closer to the wall, would cast a larger shadow. Her evidence for this was that in the evenings, when the earth has rotated and so you are further away from the sun than you are at midday, your shadow lasts longer. Most people just accepted it. I said it was wrong. Ended up being pulled out of class with someone who agreed with me and sent to talk to a different teacher also teaching the same class about it. We did not get anywhere with that discussion. I'm pretty sure I drew out rays and everything. I was made to sit on the floor to do my work at school because I was swinging on my chair and lost desk privileges as a result. An unsuspecting teacher walks in and trips over me, being a short child, fracturing their wrist. Turns out it was my fault, giving me 3 weeks of after-school detention. I was 10. Our school hosted a public speaking competition with a cash prize for each of the classes. We were the last class to do it at the end of term. I skipped a revision class because I was pretty good at public speaking and thought I could win the money. I wrote my speech while listening to my classmates and won. But when I went to claim my prize they told me they were no longer giving out cash prizes. Every winner from every other class received a cash prize. I am still bitter. Was in school-sponsored speech therapy when I was in elementary school, the kind where they'd pull you out of class to go practice making the R sound. I found out later that my mouth was the wrong shape. which they had to correct with 2 different metal horror devices before I could even have braces. But at the time no one explained this to me and I thought I was just bad. The speech teacher was a huge freaking bee who always seemed mildly annoyed that we weren't trying harder at making the sounds. One day, when my mother was picking me up, I got into the car and started talking about my day and apparently pronounced something correctly without realizing it. She got very excited, and I got very excited, and the next time I went to speech therapy I excitedly told my fellow classmates. The teacher interrupted me partway through my story to say, "You know that's not true, flying guinea pig," and then refused to hear me out, and threatened to send me to the principal when I got upset. I remember telling her to call my mother and ask her, and her saying that she didn't have time, but that I should be grateful that she didn't because now my mother wouldn't know I was a liar. I was not a freaking liar. I was also in a second get pulled out of class group when I was in 2nd grade, where we'd go and sit in a small room off the library and read books aloud and then talk about them. I honestly thought it was like the speech class and I was in it because I was stupid. Because no one freaking told me it was a gifted class. No one ever praised me for being in it, and the teacher was always pushing me to do harder and better. Not to mention they would pull me out during reading time, and my teacher would keep right on reading aloud to us, so that I ended up missing huge chunks of the story. I told her it hurt my feelings and she said she was sorry, but didn't change anything. As a speech therapist, this makes me sad to hear. I would be so excited for one of my students if they told a story like that because it would mean they really were trying. R is probably the hardest sound to fix, so the frustration is real for both the therapist and the students. Didn't get the main bingo prize because I won too fast and the game needed to go on a bit more. My cousin won the next game and got the main prize. She's also an annoying C, whilst I was a well-behaved kid. Generally, well-behaved kids get the most injustice. Source: I work in kindergarten and see the other employees be unjust with well-behaved kids all the time. Gets on my nerves. I was always the kid they put between 2 bad kids to keep them from acting up because I was quiet. So much is wrong with that. When I was 15 I was riding my bike from the shops with 2 friends. There was a huge housing development nearby and we often went through it to see what had been happening. It was Sunday so no one was working. We hopped off our bikes and had a wander about, didn't touch anything like marking stakes. We were hardly well-behaved kids, but in this case we had done nothing wrong. Nearby was a guy with his 2 little kids, who were climbing on the bulldozers and machinery. We didn't pay any attention to them, but I kinda noticed he was staring at us. On the ride back home, less than 10 minutes, a cop car pulled up. That guy had rushed home and called the cops to report us for trespassing. Even though his kids were more guilty of this than we were, we didn't actually enter the work site. The guy went further. He outright lied and said I had broken into the site office and he saw me taking things. Because of this, I wound up being taken home by the cops. In spite of my protests, I wound up with a criminal record for trespassing. They couldn't prove I'd been into the site office, so they didn't report that. They refused to acknowledge that the guy who reported us was guilty of the same crime. They seemed to assume that because we were kids we were lying. I have no idea why this fuckface did this. My parents say they believed me but were furious because no one in this family has ever had the police at the door for them, although the look on my dad's face suggested this wasn't true. Wish I could find that butthole who reported us. If you ever find him, I hope you beat the crap out of him. When dad was off on a Friday night, we would all share a bag of 50x fun size sweets. Depending on how many of us were at home, we would get less packets. When there was all 11 home, it sucked. So anyway, I got a coveted packet of Maltesers, usually about 8 in a packet. In mine there was 1 Malteser. Said to dad and he told me to write a letter to Mars and that maybe they would reply and give me a free packet of Maltesers. I ran upstairs to mum, got a pen, paper, envelope and a stamp. Ran down so excited for dad to help me write my letter. It was then I found that someone had eaten my Malteser. I have brought it up every Christmas dinner since and no one will admit to it. Keep bringing it up, never stop, unrelentless, crush them until they crack. My friend got the last slice of pizza at school, and a teacher just walks up behind him and takes it off his plate and starts eating it. Alpha as frick. I had recently underwent heart surgery and was taking things easy. I was waiting for my ride home at the upper parking lot. Seniors, instead of walking a few hundred yards away to the lower parking lot. Freshmen juniors, I was approached by the freshman principal. P. What are you doing here? M. I'm waiting for my ride. He is on his way up now. P. You can't stand here. You need to go to the bottom lot. M. I understand, but my ride is literally on his way up to get me right now. P. What's your name? M. I'm not sure why it matters. I'm just waiting for my friend. That's insubordination. 3 days out of school suspension. I dueled a freaking bee for a shiny Charizard card in one, only to have the duel broken up by a teacher and both decks confiscated. When I came to collect it at the end of the day with my dad, it had been misplaced. That bee has my deck somewhere. I feel like if you confiscate something and lose it, it's your job to replace it. I took your stuff but then I lost it, oh well lol. Once in school I sat on a pile of pillows, sort of high, just chilling. Another kid came by, started shaking the pillow tower, made me fall down and hit my head. When I told the teacher, she went, if you're a part of the game, you'll have to face the consequences. What freaking game? I just sat there by myself, chilling, and this little butthole came by and started being a dong. I'm surprised she didn't scold you for being sort of high. My mom let me and my brother have a bottle of soda each. He finished his. I decided to save half for the next day. The next day, my mom made me split my half full day-old bottle of soda with my brother, despite that he already had finished a full bottle. Why? I transferred to a new school when I was in 3rd grade. I'm Korean and had previously been at a 99% white Catholic school, and only one kid in the entire school had ever given me grief about my race, and the other kids promptly rallied with me against him. My parents were excited to put me in a multi-racial school. Almost every single demographic in this diverse school turned on me and were racist little shoots to me for years. Which amuses me today when people tell me you can't possibly understand racism. One girl in particular targeted me in 4th grade by saying I molested her in the library. The principal coerced a false confession out of me by browbeating me and yelling at me, but the guidance counselor and my teacher came to my defense, saying that the quiet, well-behaved, shy kid wouldn't do anything like that, and that I had been nowhere near my accuser at the time. The same girl then tried to accuse me of calling the librarian a W. I still vividly remember that same principal asking me for the definition, and little 4th grade me not having a clue. For the record, I called her the Horror because she was mean and scary to us kids, or, at least, that's how we perceived her. Still a dong move on my part, yes, but it didn't warrant a blatant lie about me being told. And then there was the 5th grade math teacher who put me in the back of the class knowing I had seeing problems, then ridiculed me when I couldn't see the board. When my sister had her 2 years later, my mom chewed her out, saying, you turned my son off of math, and you will not do it to my daughter. Not my daughter, you be. Had to sit at the table until all my food was eaten. I was sick and threw up and had to eat my vomit. I also crapped myself and wasn't allowed to go clean myself up until after I finished eating my puke. That was the last time I ever saw my father as a friend. He was just a cruel man that lived with us after that. Bad guy from Shadows of the Empire for N64 is named Zizza, pronounced Chizor. My entire freaking school claimed it was pronounced Xavier, because it was the closest or some crap. I got freaking roasted for pronouncing it Chizor and spent weeks pulling my goddamn hair out, bringing up video evidence of creators pronouncing it Chizor, pre-YouTube and all that, so all I could say was I saw it on TV, to try to get literally anybody to agree with me, because taking a made up alien name and just pronouncing it like a completely different English name because it starts and ends with the same letters made no goddamn sense, and I swore I was taking crazy pills. I'd provide a compelling argument. So is Chewbacca actually pronounced Charlie then? And be met with LOL, damn, it's obviously Xavier. My best friend pulled out some book of baby names and went to the X section and said, see? No Zizza, it's Xavier. I went to my dad with my frustrations as again, this debate had been raging for weeks and I was getting desperate, and he basically said, the frick you on about? Who gives a crap? 20 years later and I'm still fired up about it. There's a reason they call you Angry Dave. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.